Hello everyone and welcome back to the Horror Hut. Now, I know a lot of you use these videos to sleep, so before you drift off I thought it would be a fun idea if everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world. Also like and subscribe if you are enjoying the episodes. Right, let's get comfy and relax and let's begin. I had been driving through Nevada for hours. The desert stretched endlessly, and the sun was starting to set. I needed a break from the monotony, so when I saw a hitchhiker by the side of the road, I thought picking him up might make the drive a little less lonely. He looked harmless enough. Tall, skinny, wearing a faded jacket and carrying a small backpack. As he climbed in, he thanked me, introduced himself as Jake, and we started chatting. At first, he seemed friendly, talking about how he had been hitchhiking across the country, seeing the sights. We drove for a while, making small talk. He told me stories about his travels, and I shared a bit about mine. But as the miles went by, something about his demeanor started to change. His questions became more personal, more probing. He asked about my family, my job, where I was headed. I tried to brush it off, keeping my answers vague. The sun dipped below the horizon, and darkness fell over the desert. The road was empty, just us in the vast, open landscape. Jake's tone shifted, becoming more aggressive. He asked if I had any money on me, and when I said no, he laughed, but it wasn't a friendly laugh. "You sure about that?" he asked, his voice low and menacing. I glanced over at him, my grip tightening on the steering wheel. "Yeah, I'm sure." Jake's hand disappeared into his backpack, and my heart started to race. I kept my eyes on the road, trying to stay calm. He pulled out a knife, holding it casually but making sure I saw it. "Pull over," he said, his voice steady. I hesitated, and he pressed the knife against my side. I said, "Pull over." I eased the car onto the shoulder, my mind racing for a way out. Jake made me turn off the engine and hand over my keys. He took my wallet and phone, tossing them into his backpack. "Get out," he ordered. I got out of the car, my legs shaking. He followed, keeping the knife pointed at me. The desert was silent, the only sound the wind rustling through the scrub. "Start walking," he said, gesturing toward the open desert. "And don't look back." I did as he said, my heart pounding in my chest. I walked, the sound of his footsteps close behind. After a few minutes, he stopped. "That's far enough," he said. "Turn around." I turned to face him, and he was grinning, the knife glinting in the moonlight. "Let's play a game," he said, his eyes wild. "If you can make it back to the road without me catching you, you can go free." My mind was spinning. This was insane. But I didn't have a choice. I nodded, taking a deep breath. "Go," he said, and I ran. I ran as fast as I could, my lungs burning, my legs aching. I could hear him behind me, laughing, taunting me. The desert seemed endless, the road a distant hope. I stumbled over rocks and scrub, my mind focused on one thing, surviving. His footsteps grew closer, and I pushed myself harder, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I finally saw the road up ahead, a dark line in the moonlight. I was almost there, but so was he. I could feel him closing in, hear his breath, his laughter. I reached the road and collapsed, my body trembling. Jake was right behind me, but he stopped, his knife still in hand. "Not bad," he said, his voice filled with mock admiration. "But the game isn't over yet." He lunged at me, and I rolled to the side, scrambling to my feet. I saw headlights in the distance, a car coming our way. I waved my arms, shouting for help. Jake grabbed me, trying to drag me back into the desert, but I fought him with everything I had. The car slowed, and I could see the driver's face, wide-eyed and confused. "Help!" I screamed. "He's got a knife." The driver jumped out, a burly man with a shotgun. He aimed it at Jake, who froze, his grip on me loosening. "Let him go," the driver said, his voice calm but firm. Jake hesitated, then shoved me away, backing off with the knife still in his hand. The driver kept the shotgun trained on him as he climbed into his car, gunning the engine and speeding away. I stood there, shaking, as the driver approached. "You okay, son?" he asked. I nodded, my voice barely a whisper. "Yeah, I think so." He helped me into his truck and drove me to the nearest town. We called the police, and I gave them a description of Jake and what had happened. They assured me they would search for him, but I didn't have much hope. I couldn't shake the terror of that night, the feeling of being hunted. I was lucky to be alive, and I knew it. I was driving home late from a party in Florida. The roads were pretty empty, and it was just me and the long stretch of highway ahead. The night was dark, and the only light came from my headlights cutting through the blackness. I felt a bit uneasy, but I just wanted to get home. After a while, I noticed a car behind me. At first, I didn't think much of it. But then I realized it had been following me for miles. Every turn I took, every lane change, the car stayed right behind me. I tried to convince myself it was just a coincidence. But then the car started flashing its lights at me. Bright and blinding, over and over. It wasn't a friendly signal, it felt aggressive. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my heart starting to race. I sped up a little, hoping they would pass me or turn off, but they didn't. They stayed right on my tail, flashing their lights. I glanced at my phone on the passenger seat, thinking about calling for help, but I didn't want to take my eyes off the road. I tried to calm myself, thinking maybe they needed help or were trying to warn me about something. But deep down, I felt something was very wrong. The car sped up and got even closer, almost touching my bumper. I could see the outline of the driver in my rearview mirror, but it was too dark to make out any details. They were trying to force me off the road. Panic set in. I couldn't pull over. I had to keep moving. I remembered a gas station a few miles ahead and decided to head there, hoping it would be open and I could find some help. I kept my speed steady, trying not to let them see how scared I was. The car kept flashing its lights, getting more aggressive. As I neared the gas station, I felt a bit of relief. But then, just as I was about to turn into the lot, the car swerved, cutting me off and forcing me to miss the turn. I had to keep going straight, deeper into the dark highway. My hands were shaking, and I felt tears welling up. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just let them keep following me. I took a deep breath and decided to try something risky. I slammed on my brakes, hoping to catch them off guard. The car behind me screeched to a halt, and I took the chance to speed off again, putting some distance between us. But it didn't last long. They caught up quickly, even more determined now. They pulled up alongside me, and I could see a figure gesturing wildly. It didn't look like they wanted to talk. It felt like a threat. My mind was racing, trying to think of what to do next. I saw a sign for an upcoming exit and decided to take it. Maybe I could lose them on the smaller roads. I swerved onto the exit ramp, my tires screeching. The car followed, still flashing its lights. The road was winding, and I hoped I could use the curves to my advantage. I drove as fast as I dared, the car still right behind me. I spotted a small diner up ahead, its neon sign flickering. It looked like it was still open. I made a split-second decision and turned sharply into the diner's parking lot, almost skidding to a stop. I jumped out of my car and ran inside, breathless and terrified. The diner was nearly empty, just a couple of late-night customers and the cook behind the counter. I quickly told them what was happening, my words tumbling out in a panic. The cook nodded and went to the phone to call the police. I glanced out the window and saw the car idling in the parking lot, its headlights still on. The driver was just sitting there, watching. I felt a chill run down my spine. The police were on their way, but it felt like an eternity. The cook came over, trying to reassure me, but I couldn't shake the fear. Finally, I saw the flashing lights of a police car pulling into the lot. The car that had been following me sped off, tires screeching. The police officer ran in, and I quickly told him everything. He took my statement and assured me they would patrol the area, but the driver was long gone. The officer offered to follow me home to make sure I was safe, and I gratefully accepted. The drive home was a blur, my mind replaying the night's events over and over. When I finally got home, I locked all the doors and windows, double-checking everything. I tried to sleep, but every little noise made me jump. The fear lingered long after that night. Every time I drive at night now, I can't help but check my rearview mirror constantly, always wondering if someone might be following me again. We were on a road trip through Texas, just me, my wife, and our 2 kids. The sun was setting, and we decided to stop at a rest area to stretch our legs and grab some snacks. The place looked deserted, but we were all tired and needed a break. I parked the car and we all got out. The kids ran to the restroom while my wife and I headed to the vending machines. The place was eerily quiet, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I shrugged it off, thinking it was just because we were in the middle of nowhere. As I was fumbling with the vending machine, trying to get it to take my dollar, I noticed a group of men standing near the edge of the parking lot. There were 5 of them, leaning against an old truck, smoking and talking. They looked rough, like they had been on the road for days. My wife nudged me and whispered, "Let's get the kids and go." I don't like the look of them. I nodded, feeling a knot forming in my stomach. We called the kids over and started walking back to the car. That's when the men started moving toward us. "Hey there," one of them called out. "Where are you folks headed?" His voice was casual, but there was something menacing in his tone. "Just passing through," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "We're on a road trip." The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "A road trip, huh? Sounds fun. Mind if we join you?" I shook my head, trying to keep things calm. "Sorry, we're in a bit of a hurry." The men closed in, forming a loose circle around us. My heart was pounding, and I could see the fear in my wife's eyes. The kids were starting to look scared too. "Come on, we're just being friendly," another one said, stepping closer. No need to be rude. I knew we were in trouble. "Look, we don't want any trouble," I said, my voice trembling. "We're just going to get back in our car and leave." The first man chuckled, a cold, mirthless sound. "Who said anything about trouble? We're just looking for some company." I tried to keep my family behind me as we edged toward the car. "Please, just let us go." One of the men grabbed my wife's arm, and she let out a small scream. "Don't touch her," I shouted, fear turning into anger. "Or what?" the man sneered, tightening his grip. Before I could react, one of the others pushed me, hard. I stumbled but managed to stay on my feet. My kids were crying now, clinging to my wife. I had to do something, but I felt helpless, outnumbered and outmatched. Suddenly, headlights swept across the parking lot, and a truck pulled in. The men froze, their attention shifting to the new arrival. An older man got out of the truck, taking in the scene with a wary look. "What's going on here?" he called out, his voice carrying authority. The men hesitated, then slowly backed off. "Just a misunderstanding," one of them muttered. "We were just leaving." They walked back to their truck, glancing back at us with hard, unfriendly eyes. The older man watched them go, then turned to us. "You folks okay?" I nodded, my voice shaky. "Yeah, thanks to you." He looked at our car and then back at us. "You should get going. It's not safe here after dark." We didn't need to be told twice. We hurried back to our car, and I drove off, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly they hurt. My wife tried to comfort the kids, but I could see she was just as shaken as I was. We drove in silence for a while, the tension slowly easing as we put distance between us and the rest area. Finally, my wife spoke. "Do you think they were going to?" "I don't know," I replied, not wanting to finish the thought. "But we're safe now. That's what matters." We found a motel a few miles down the road and decided to stop for the night. I checked us in and made sure the room was secure before letting my family in. It was a long time before any of us could sleep, the events of the evening replaying in my mind. Even now, I can't forget the look in those men's eyes, the way they closed in on us like predators. We're more careful on road trips now, always sticking to well-lit, populated areas. I was driving through the Midwest on a business trip. It was late, around 11 p.m., and the highway was almost empty. I had been on the road for hours and was looking forward to reaching my motel for the night. Suddenly, I felt the car wobble and heard a thumping noise. I pulled over to the side of the road and got out to check. Sure enough, I had a flat tire. I sighed, annoyed with my luck. I had never changed a tire by myself before, but I knew I had to figure it out. I opened the trunk and found the spare tire and jack. As I was trying to remember how to use them, I saw headlights approaching. A truck slowed down and stopped behind my car. A man got out and walked over. He was in his mid-40s, wearing a baseball cap and a friendly smile. "Need some help?" he asked. I was hesitant but relieved to see someone. "Yes, please. I have a flat tire, and I'm not sure how to change it." He nodded and got to work immediately. "No problem. I've done this plenty of times." He seemed confident and capable, so I let him take over. I stood back and watched as he removed the flat tire and started putting on the spare. He was quick, and I felt grateful for his help. As he was finishing up, he struck up a conversation. "So, where are you headed?" "I'm on a business trip," I replied. "Just trying to get to a motel for the night." "Long drive, huh?" he said, tightening the last lug nut. "All done. You should be good to go now." I thanked him and offered to pay him for his help, but he waved it off. "No need for that. Just glad I could help." He then said, "Actually, my truck's acting up. Could you give me a ride to the next town? It's not far." I hesitated. Something about his request made me uneasy, but I felt obligated to return the favor. "Okay," I agreed reluctantly. He got into the passenger seat, and I started the car. As we drove, he became chatty, asking more questions about me. The road was dark, and the small talk did little to ease my growing discomfort. Suddenly, he pointed to a side road. "Take her right here. It's a shortcut." I followed his directions, but my gut told me something was off. The road became narrower and more isolated. I glanced at him, and he seemed to be watching me closely. "Are you sure this is the right way?" I asked. "Trust me," he said, his tone shifting. "Just keep going." My heart started to race. I knew I had to get out of this situation. "Actually, I think we should turn around. I don't feel comfortable going this way." Before I could react, he reached over and grabbed the steering wheel, forcing the car to swerve off the road. The car came to a sudden stop in a secluded area. He turned to me, his friendly demeanor gone. "You're not going anywhere." Panic surged through me. I tried to open the door, but he had locked it. He grabbed my arm, his grip tight and painful. "Stay still," he ordered, his voice cold. I had to think fast. I remembered my phone was in my purse on the passenger seat floor. "Please, let me go," I pleaded, trying to distract him. "I have money. You can take it." He sneered. "I don't want your money." As he loosened his grip to reach for something in his pocket, I seized the moment. I grabbed my phone and hit the emergency call button. He noticed and lunged at me, but I managed to press send before he knocked the phone out of my hand. He was furious. "Stupid girl," he snarled, pinning me against the seat. "You just made things worse for yourself." I struggled, adrenaline giving me strength. I kicked at him, managing to land a blow to his chest. He stumbled back, giving me just enough time to unlock the door and scramble out of the car. I ran as fast as I could into the darkness, my heart pounding in my ears. I heard him cursing and shouting behind me, but I didn't look back. I knew I had to keep moving. I could hear the faint sound of sirens in the distance, and I prayed they would find me in time. I spotted a farmhouse with lights on and sprinted towards it, hoping someone would be awake. I pounded on the door, screaming for help. An older couple answered, their faces filled with concern. "Please, help me." I gasped. "Someone is trying to hurt me." They quickly let me in and locked the door. The man grabbed a shotgun and stood guard while his wife called the police. Minutes later, the sirens grew louder, and I saw the flashing lights of police cars approaching. The officers took my statement and searched the area. They found the man hiding near my car. He was arrested and taken away. I was shaken but relieved that it was over. The police escorted me to a nearby motel, and I finally felt safe. I called my family to let them know what had happened, and they were shocked and grateful that I was okay. I realized how close I had come to something terrible. I was traveling through Arizona in my RV, enjoying the open road and the desert scenery. I had been driving for hours, taking in the vast landscape, when I saw them, a young couple on the side of the road, waving frantically. I hesitated but decided to stop. They looked desperate, and it was a scorching hot day. The guy, maybe in his mid-20s, approached first. He had short, messy hair and was wearing a faded t-shirt and jeans. The girl was right behind him, clutching a backpack. She had long, blonde hair and looked exhausted. "Hey, man, our car broke down a few miles back. Can you give us a ride to the next town?" the guy asked. I felt a pang of sympathy. "Sure, hop in. It's not far from here." They thanked me and climbed into the RV. As I started driving, they introduced themselves as Jake and Lisa. They seemed friendly enough, though a bit on edge. I tried to make small talk, asking where they were headed. "Just trying to get to Flagstaff," Jake said, glancing at Lisa. "We have friends there." As we drove, I noticed Jake kept checking the rearview mirror, and Lisa seemed restless. Something felt off, but I shrugged it off. Maybe they were just stressed from being stranded. After about half an hour, we reached a small gas station. "Mind if we stop here for a bit?" Jake asked. "We could use a bathroom break." "Sure," I said, pulling in. We all got out, and while they headed inside, I filled up the tank. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. When they came back, they were whispering to each other, looking around nervously. We got back on the road, and that's when things took a turn. Jake suddenly pulled out a gun. "Keep driving," he ordered. My heart started pounding. "What the hell is this?" I demanded. "Just keep calm," Lisa said, trying to soothe me. "We need your help, and you won't get hurt if you cooperate." Jake explained that they were on the run. They had stolen some money and were trying to get away from the police. My mind raced. I was trapped in my own RV with two fugitives. "Why me?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Your RV is perfect for staying off the radar," Jake said. "We just need to get to Flagstaff, and then we'll be out of your hair." I nodded, gripping the steering wheel tightly. I had to stay calm and think. They were desperate, which made them dangerous. I needed to find a way out of this without getting hurt. As we drove, Jake kept a gun pointed at me while Lisa rummaged through their backpack. She pulled out a map and spread it on the table. "Take this route," she said, pointing. "It avoids the main highways." I followed her directions, the tension in the RV thickening with every mile. We drove for what felt like hours, the sun setting and casting long shadows across the desert. I kept thinking about my options. Maybe I could signal for help at the next gas station or rest stop. We stopped again at a remote gas station. Jake made me go inside with him while Lisa stayed in the RV. Inside, I saw a payphone. It was my chance. While Jake was distracted, I quickly dialed 911 and whispered our location, hoping the operator heard me before Jake noticed. We got back on the road, and I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe help was on the way. As night fell, Jake's paranoia grew. He kept looking out the windows, muttering about the police catching up to them. Suddenly, headlights appeared in the distance. Jake panicked. "They're onto us," he shouted. He made me pull off the road and into a secluded area. The headlights got closer, and I realized it was a police car. Jake freaked out, grabbing Lisa and dragging her outside. I followed, trying to stay calm. The police car stopped, and an officer stepped out, his hand on his holster. "Everything okay here?" he asked, eyeing us suspiciously. "Yes, officer," I said, trying to sound calm. "Just had some engine trouble." Jake tightened his grip on Lisa, the gun still in his hand. The officer noticed and drew his weapon. "Drop the gun," he ordered. Jake hesitated, then aimed the gun at the officer. A shot rang out, and everything went chaotic. The officer fired back, hitting Jake in the shoulder. Lisa screamed and ran towards me, and I pulled her behind the RV for cover. More police cars arrived, their sirens blaring. Officers surrounded us, shouting commands. Jake was on the ground, bleeding and disarmed. Lisa was sobbing, her face pale with fear. The police quickly secured the scene, handcuffing Jake and taking Lisa into custody. An officer checked on me, making sure I was unarmed. I was shaken but relieved. It was over. They took my statement, and I learned that the couple had been on a crime spree across several states. The police had been on their trail, and my 911 call had helped them locate us. I watched as the police cars drove away, taking Jake and Lisa with them. I was left standing in the quiet desert, my RV parked nearby. The fear and tension slowly drained away, replaced by exhaustion. I got back into the RV and drove to the nearest town, finding a motel to spend the night. As I lay in bed, I replayed the events in my mind, still in disbelief. I had survived a harrowing encounter, one that could have ended much worse. The next morning, I continued my trip, grateful to be safe. The open road seemed less inviting now, but I was determined to move forward. I was driving through Utah on a lonely highway, trying to get to my friend's house. The sun was setting, and the GPS on my phone lost signal hours ago. I didn't recognize any of the landmarks around me. The highway stretched endlessly in both directions with nothing but desert and scrubland. I had been driving for hours without seeing another car, let alone a gas station or town. My fuel gauge was hovering near empty, and panic started to creep in. I needed directions, or at least someone to tell me where I was. As I rounded a bend, I saw a truck parked on the side of the road. There was a man standing next to it, leaning against the door. Relief washed over me. Finally, someone who might help. I pulled over and got out of my car, walking towards him. He looked to be in his late 40s, with a grizzled beard and worn-out clothes. He smiled as I approached, but something about it didn't seem quite right. "Evening," he said, his voice rough. "You look lost." "Yeah, I am," I admitted, trying to keep my voice steady. "I was wondering if you could give me directions. My GPS isn't working." "Sure thing," he said, pushing off his truck and walking closer to me. "Where are you headed?" I told him the name of my friend's town. His smile widened, but his eyes remained cold. "That's quite a ways from here. You've taken a wrong turn somewhere. Can you point me in the right direction?" I asked, feeling uneasy. "Why don't you come closer?" "I have a map in my truck," he said, turning and opening the door. Something in my gut told me not to follow him. "I'm fine here, thanks," I said, trying to sound casual. "If you could just tell me which road to take." His expression darkened. "It's complicated. You really need to see the map." "No, that's okay," I insisted, backing towards my car. Suddenly, he lunged at me, grabbing my arm. "You're coming with me," he growled. I yanked my arm free and sprinted back to my car. I could hear his footsteps pounding behind me. I threw myself into the driver's seat, slammed the door, and locked it just as he reached for the handle. He banged on the window, shouting, but I didn't wait to hear what he said. I turned the key, and the engine roared to life. I floored the gas pedal, my tires kicking up dust as I sped away. In the rearview mirror, I saw him run back to his truck. My heart raced as I realized he was going to follow me. I had to find a way to lose him. The highway was empty and straight, no turnoffs or side roads in sight. I pushed the car as fast as it would go, but his truck was gaining on me. I could see his headlights getting closer and closer. Desperation clawed at me. I couldn't outrun him on this road. I had to think of something. Up ahead, I saw a dirt road branching off to the left. Without hesitation, I swerved onto it, hoping it would lead me somewhere safe. The dirt road was rough and narrow, kicking up clouds of dust. I kept glancing in the mirror, and sure enough, his truck followed, headlights bouncing with the uneven terrain. The road twisted and turned, leading deeper into the desert. My hands clenched the steering wheel, my mind racing for a plan. I needed to hide or find help. Suddenly, I saw an old, abandoned building up ahead. It looked like it used to be a gas station. I veered off the road and skidded to a stop behind the building, chilling the engine and lights. I held my breath, listening. The sound of his truck grew louder, then started to fade. He must have kept going. I waited for what felt like an eternity before creeping out of the car. I needed to find a way to signal for help or get back to the main road without him seeing me. I slipped around the back of the building, staying in the shadows. The desert night was eerily silent, every sound amplified in my ears. I inched forward, keeping low, and peered around the corner. His truck was parked on the road, headlights off. He was out of the truck, scanning the area with a flashlight. My heart pounded in my chest. I had to move fast. I crouched low and started to make my way towards the main road, using the scrub and rocks as cover. Every time he turned his flashlight in my direction, I froze, barely daring to breathe. Finally, I reached the road and broke into a run. My car was still hidden behind the building, but I needed to get to safety first. I ran for what felt like miles until I saw the faint glow of headlights in the distance. I waved my arms, hoping to catch the driver's attention. The car slowed and pulled over. An elderly couple rolled down the window, looking concerned. "Please, help me," I gasped. "There's a man trying to chase me." They didn't hesitate. They unlocked the door, and I scrambled inside. As we drove away, I explained everything that had happened. They took me to the nearest town, where I called the police. The officers were kind and took my statement. They promised to send someone to retrieve my car and search for the man. It took a while to calm down, but I was grateful to be safe. The couple who helped me were incredibly supportive, and they even let me stay with them until I could arrange to get home. Looking back, I'm still shaken by the experience. I trusted my instincts, and that's what saved me. I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't listened to that gut feeling when the man first approached. I was driving through Tennessee on my way to a gig, excited to play at a small bar in a town I'd never been to. The road was long and winding, and I had been driving for hours. The sun was starting to set, casting a warm glow over the landscape. I was looking forward to reaching my destination, but the drive was peaceful and I didn't mind the solitude. About an hour from the town, I saw a car pulled over on the side of the road. A man was standing next to it, waving his arms. His car had its hood up, and he looked like he needed help. I hesitated for a moment but then decided to pull over. I figured it was the right thing to do. I rolled down my window and asked if he needed a hand. He looked to be in his mid-30s, scruffy, and a bit rough around the edges. He seemed grateful and explained that his car had broken down and he didn't have a phone signal to call for help. He asked if I could give him a ride to the nearest town. I agreed, feeling a bit uneasy but not wanting to leave him stranded. He got into the passenger seat and we set off. He introduced himself as Jake and thanked me repeatedly for stopping. He seemed friendly enough at first, but there was something in his eyes that made me uneasy. As we drove, he started talking about random things, his words slurring a bit. I realized he might be drunk. He rambled about his life, his job, and how he had ended up in this situation. His stories didn't always make sense, and he would occasionally let out a strange, hollow laugh. About 20 minutes into the drive, his demeanor changed. He stopped talking for a while, just staring out the window. Then, out of nowhere, he asked if I believed in fate. His tone was off, and it made me uncomfortable. I tried to steer the conversation back to lighter topics, but he kept pressing. Jake's questions became more personal and intrusive. He asked if I was married, if I had kids, where I lived. I answered vaguely, trying not to reveal too much. He started to get agitated, muttering under his breath. Suddenly, he turned to me with a wild look in his eyes and said, "Do you think anyone would miss you if you disappeared?" My heart skipped a beat. I laughed nervously, trying to brush it off as a joke, but he didn't laugh back. The air in the car grew tense. I could feel my pulse quicken, and my hands started to sweat on the steering wheel. I glanced at him from the corner of my eye, trying to gauge his intentions. He was fidgeting, his fingers tapping rhythmically on his knee. Jake's mood swung again, and he started talking about violence. He described fights he'd been in, people he'd hurt. His stories were graphic and disturbing. I felt trapped, stuck in the car with this unstable man. My mind raced, trying to think of a way to get him out of my car safely. He then demanded that I pull over. We were in the middle of nowhere, and there were no other cars on the road. I tried to reason with him, saying we were almost to town, but he became more aggressive, yelling and threatening me. He pulled out a knife from his pocket and waved it at me, shouting that he'd use it if I didn't stop the car. I had no choice but to comply. My hands were shaking as I pulled over to the side of the road. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. Jake ordered me to get out of the car, and I did, praying he wouldn't hurt me. Outside, the evening air was cool, but I was sweating. He made me walk around to the back of the car and told me to open the trunk. I did as he said, my mind racing with fear. I thought about making a run for it, but we were in the middle of nowhere, and I didn't know if I could outrun him. As I opened the trunk, he grabbed my shoulder and shoved me inside. I tried to resist, but he was stronger. He slammed the trunk shut, leaving me in darkness. I could hear him laughing as he walked back to the driver's seat. My mind raced with panic. I had to get out of there before he did something worse. I felt around the trunk, looking for anything that could help me. My guitar case was in there, along with some other gear. I found a tire iron and used it to try and pry open the trunk. It was slow going, but eventually, I managed to create a small gap. I could hear Jake cursing up front. He was struggling to start the car. He must have realized he didn't know how to drive it. This gave me a bit more time. I worked furiously, trying to widen the gap. Finally, I managed to push the trunk open enough to squeeze through. I tumbled out and ran towards the front of the car. Jake saw me and started yelling, but I didn't stop. I sprinted down the road, adrenaline fueling my legs. I heard him start the car and rev the engine. He was coming after me. I ran off the road and into the scrubland, hoping the rough terrain would slow him down. I could hear the car crashing through the brush behind me. My lungs burned, and my legs felt like they would give out, but I kept going. In the distance, I saw a faint light. It looked like a farmhouse. I ran towards it, praying someone would be home. The car's headlights were getting closer, and I could hear Jake shouting behind me. I reached the farmhouse and pounded on the door, screaming for help. A man opened the door, looking startled. I begged him to let me in, explaining that someone was trying to kill me. He pulled me inside just as Jake's car skidded to a stop outside. The man locked the door and called the police. Jake banged on the door, shouting obscenities and threats. I hid in the corner, shaking with fear. It felt like hours before I heard the sound of sirens. The police arrived and arrested Jake. They found the knife and some other weapons in his car. They told me I was lucky to be alive. I felt a mix of relief and shock, unable to process what had just happened. The man who helped me was kind, offering me a place to stay until I could get back on my feet. I called my friend and told them what had happened. They were horrified and offered to come get me. Looking back, I realize how close I came to losing everything. I was driving through New Mexico, heading back home after visiting my sister. The roads were empty, and the vast desert stretched out endlessly on either side. It was peaceful, in a way, but also a bit eerie. I had been driving for hours and still had a long way to go. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the landscape, I noticed a group of bikers in my rearview mirror. There were about 6 of them, and they were writing information, looking like something out of a movie. At first, I didn't think much of it. Bikers travel these roads all the time. After a while, though, they started getting closer. I could hear the roar of their engines growing louder. They spread out, some riding beside me, some behind. It felt like they were surrounding my car. I glanced over at one of the bikers and saw him staring right back at me, a smirk on his face. I felt a chill run down my spine. I tried to keep calm and focus on the road, but my hands were gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles were white. The bikers began to weave in and out of their formation, coming closer to my car. One of them revved his engine loudly, making me jump. I decided to speed up a little, hoping to put some distance between us. But they matched my speed easily. One of them pulled up beside my window and shouted something I couldn't hear over the noise of the engines. He laughed and sped ahead, the others following. For a moment, I thought they were leaving me alone. But then they slowed down, forcing me to slow down too. I was trapped in the middle of them, my heart pounding. I didn't know what they wanted, but I knew it wasn't good. I thought about calling for help, but my phone had no signal out here in the middle of nowhere. The bikers continued to toy with me, speeding up and slowing down, getting dangerously close to my car. I could see their faces now, grinning and menacing. They were enjoying this, whatever this was. I felt a rising sense of panic. I had to do something. I remembered seeing a gas station a few miles back and decided to head there. I hoped there would be people around, someone who could help. I took the next exit and headed towards the gas station, praying the bikers wouldn't follow. But they did. As I pulled into the gas station, the bikers surrounded my car again. There was no one else in sight, and the place looked deserted. My heart sank. I was on my own. I parked near the entrance and quickly got out of the car, trying to act like I wasn't scared out of my mind. The bikers dismounted and followed me, their boots crunching on the gravel. One of them, a tall guy with a beard and a leather jacket, stepped forward. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You lost or something?" I tried to keep my voice steady as I said, "Just getting gas." I walked towards the entrance of the gas station, but he grabbed my arm, stopping me. His grip was strong, and I could feel his callous fingers digging into my skin. "Not so fast," he said, pulling me closer. The other bikers laughed. I felt a wave of fear wash over me. I didn't know what they wanted, but I knew I had to get away. I yanked my arm free and made a run for it, heading towards the back of the gas station. I could hear them chasing after me, their boots pounding on the ground. My mind was racing, trying to think of a way out. I spotted a narrow alley between the gas station and an old storage building. I squeezed through, hoping they wouldn't be able to follow. But they did. I could hear them shouting, their voices echoing off the walls. I ran as fast as I could, my breath coming in short, panic gasps. I reached the end of the alley and found myself in an open field, nowhere to hide. I had to keep running. The bikers were gaining on me. I could feel their presence behind me, closing in. I didn't know how much longer I could keep this up. My legs were burning, and my lungs felt like they were on fire. I stumbled and nearly fell, but managed to keep going. Suddenly, I saw a car coming down the road in the distance. It was my only hope. I ran towards it, waving my arms and shouting for help. The bikers were right behind me, but I didn't look back. I focused on the car, willing it to see me. The car slowed down as it got closer, and I saw a man inside, looking confused. I ran up to the driver's side window, pounding on it and begging for help. The man looked at me, then at the bikers approaching, and his eyes widened. He unlocked the door, and I jumped in, slamming it shut behind me. "Drive!" I shouted, my voice shaking. The man didn't hesitate. He hit the gas, and we sped away, leaving the bikers behind. I glanced back and saw them standing there, looking furious. The man drove for a while before finally pulling over. He asked me what had happened, and I told him everything, my voice trembling. He offered to take me to the nearest police station, and I gratefully accepted. I knew I couldn't stay out here on my own. At the police station, I filed a report and gave them a description of the bikers. They said they would look into it, but I didn't have much hope. I was just glad to be safe. The man who had helped me offered to drive me the rest of the way to my destination, and I thanked him, feeling a bit more at ease. As we drove, I couldn't shake the feeling of fear that had settled in my chest. I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting the bikers to appear again. But they didn't. I finally reached my destination and thanked the man profusely for his help. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the bikers' faces, heard their laughter. I knew it would take a long time to get over what had happened, but I was grateful to be alive. I decided to be more careful in the future, to trust my instincts and never stop for strangers again. We were on a cross-country trip, just me and my friend Mark. We had been driving for hours, and our stomachs were growling. We saw a sign for a diner in a small town, so we decided to stop and grab a bite. It was one of those classic, old-fashioned diners with a neon sign and a few cars parked outside. We went in and sat at a booth near the back. The place was mostly empty. Just a couple of locals at the counter and an older waitress who looked like she had been working there forever. We ordered burgers and coffee and settled in, enjoying the break from the road. As we waited for our food, we couldn't help but overhear a conversation coming from the booth behind us. At first, it was just a low murmur, but then it got louder. Two men were talking, and what they were saying sent a chill down my spine. "They won't find the bodies for weeks," one of them said. We made sure of that. Mark and I exchanged glances. We tried to keep our faces neutral, but I could see the worry in his eyes. The other man replied, "We need to be careful. If anyone saw us, we're done for." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. We hadn't seen anyone when we came in, but now I was nervous. The waitress brought our food, and we tried to act normal, but I couldn't stop thinking about what we had heard. I glanced over my shoulder and caught a glimpse of the men. They looked rough, like they were used to trouble. We ate quickly, hardly tasting the food. I whispered to Mark, "We need to get out of here." He nodded, and we paid the bill and left a tip on the table. As we got up to leave, I noticed the men watching us. They had stopped talking and were now just staring. We walked out of the diner, trying to act casual, but as soon as we were outside, we hurried to the car. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking. Mark kept glancing back at the diner. "Hurry up," he urged. I finally got the door open, and we jumped in. I started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot, my heart pounding. We drove back to the main road, but I noticed in the rearview mirror that a truck had pulled out of the diner right after us. It was them. "They're following us," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Mark looked back and cursed under his breath. "What do we do?" he asked. "Just drive," I said. "We need to lose them." I pressed the gas pedal and sped up, but the truck stayed right on our tail. We were on a lonely stretch of road, no other cars in sight. The sun was setting, and the shadows were getting longer. I tried to think of a plan, but my mind was racing. "We need to find somewhere to hide," Mark said. "We can't outrun them." I scanned the sides of the road, looking for anything that might help us. Up ahead, I saw a dirt road leading off into the woods. "Hold on," I said, and turned sharply onto the dirt road. The car bounced and jolted as we sped down the rough path. The truck followed, its headlights bouncing in the rearview mirror. The road twisted and turned, and I tried to stay ahead, but they were getting closer. I saw it clearing up ahead and turned into it, slamming on the brakes. We jumped out of the car and ran into the woods. Branches slapped at my face and arms as we ran, but I didn't stop. I could hear the men shouting behind us, their footsteps crashing through the underbrush. My heart was pounding, and my breath was ragged. I had no idea where we were going, just that we had to keep moving. We stumbled into a small ravine and slid down the side, landing hard at the bottom. I could hear the men searching above us, their voices getting closer. Mark and I pressed ourselves against the dirt wall, trying to stay silent. "They went this way," one of the men shouted. I held my breath, praying they wouldn't find us. The seconds stretched into minutes, and I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. Then, the voices started to fade. They were moving away. We stayed still, hardly daring to breathe, until we were sure they were gone. Finally, I whispered, "We need to keep moving." Mark nodded, and we climbed out of the ravine, careful to stay quiet. We made our way through the woods, putting as much distance between us and the men as we could. It was dark now, and the forest was eerily quiet. After what felt like hours, we stumbled onto another road. We had no idea where we were, but we followed it, hoping it would lead us to safety. Eventually, we saw headlights in the distance. A car was coming. We stepped out onto the road and waved it down. The car stopped, and a middle-aged couple rolled down the window. "Are you okay?" the woman asked, concern in her voice. "We need help," I said. "Please, just take us to the nearest town." They let us in, and we explained what had happened as they drove. They took us to the nearest police station, where we reported everything. The police took our statement and said they would investigate, but I didn't have much hope they would find the men. We were exhausted, but grateful to be safe. The couple who had picked us up offered to drive us to a nearby motel, and we accepted. As we settled into the motel room, I couldn't shake the fear that still clung to me. We tried to get some sleep, but every noise outside made me jump. I kept thinking about what those men had said in the diner, and how close we had come to being their next victims. It was a long night, but eventually, exhaustion took over, and I drifted off. The next morning, we decided to cut our trip short and head home. We were both shaken by what had happened, and just wanted to put as much distance as possible between us and that town. As we drove, we stayed vigilant, watching for any sign of the truck. It took a while, but we finally started to feel a bit safer. We knew we had been lucky to get away. I had been hitchhiking through Oregon, trying to make my way to Portland. It was a long stretch of road, and my feet were killing me. A trucker pulled over, offering me a ride. His name was Gary. He seemed friendly enough, middle-aged with a scruffy beard and a ball cap. I was relieved to finally sit down and rest. The cab of the truck smelled like cigarettes and old coffee. I tossed my backpack on the floor and buckled up. Gary asked me where I was headed, and I told him. He said he was going that way and could take me a good part of the distance. We made small talk for a while, and I started to relax. After about an hour on the road, Gary's demeanor changed. His questions became more personal, and his eyes lingered on me in a way that made me uncomfortable. He asked if I had a boyfriend, if anyone knew where I was. I lied and said yes, that my friends were expecting me soon. He chuckled, but it didn't seem friendly. I glanced at my phone, but there was no signal out here. The road was empty, surrounded by dense forest. I started to feel trapped. I tried to stay calm, thinking of ways to keep the conversation light and steer it away from personal topics. But Gary wasn't interested in small talk anymore. He began to tell me about his past, how he'd been in trouble with the law, how he didn't trust people. His grip on the steering wheel tightened, and his eyes had a hard, angry look. My stomach churned with fear. I knew I had to get out of this truck, but we were in the middle of nowhere. Gary pulled off the highway onto a dirt road, saying he needed to take a leak. My heart raced as he stopped the truck and got out. He left the engine running. I looked around, seeing nothing but trees and darkness. This was my chance. I grabbed my backpack and quietly opened the door. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear anything else. I slipped out of the truck and ran into the woods, not looking back. Branches scratched my arms and face, but I kept going, trying to put as much distance between me and Gary as possible. After a few minutes, I heard him shouting. He was furious, cursing and yelling for me to come back. I crouched behind a large tree, trying to catch my breath and stay hidden. I could hear him crashing through the underbrush, getting closer. My mind raced, trying to think of a plan. I spotted a fallen log a few feet away and crawled over to it, squeezing underneath. I tried to make myself as small as possible, covering my mouth to stifle my breathing. Gary's footsteps got louder, and I could see his boots through the leaves. He was so close I could smell his sweat and cigarettes. He stood there for what felt like an eternity, looking around and muttering to himself. I prayed he wouldn't find me. Finally, he moved on, his footsteps fading into the distance. I waited, counting to 100 before I dared to move. I crawled out from under the log, my body aching and covered in dirt. I had no idea where I was or which way to go. I just knew I had to keep moving. I stumbled through the woods, trying to stay quiet and avoid any more noises that might give me away. Hours passed, and I was exhausted. I found a small clearing and collapsed, trying to figure out my next move. As the sun started to rise, I heard the faint sound of a highway in the distance. Hope surged through me, and I pushed myself to my feet, heading toward the sound. When I reached the road, I stuck out my thumb, praying someone decent would stop. A kind-looking woman in a minivan pulled over, and I nearly cried with relief. She asked if I was okay, and I told her I just needed to get to the nearest town. As we drove away, I looked back at the trees, still half expecting Gary to come crashing out after me. I never told the woman the full story. I just wanted to get to safety and put as much distance between me and that nightmare as possible. I eventually made it to Portland, and I was more careful about accepting rides after that. I still think about Gary sometimes, wondering if he ever picked up another hitchhiker. My buddy Dan and I were on a road trip, trying to reconnect after a few years of living in different states. We were driving through Kentucky, just cruising along and enjoying the scenery. It was late afternoon, and the sun was starting to set when we saw a woman standing by the side of the road. She looked stranded, waving her arms frantically for help. Dan slowed down, and we pulled over. She looked to be in her mid-30s, with long brown hair and a worn-out look on her face. She said her name was Lisa and that her car had broken down a few miles back. She asked if we could give her a ride to the nearest town. We felt bad for her and agreed to help. As she got into the back seat, I noticed her eyes darting around the car, but I didn't think much of it at the time. We started driving, making small talk to keep things comfortable. Lisa seemed nervous, but I figured it was just because she had been stranded for a while. We were about 10 minutes down the road when Lisa asked if we could pull over so she could use the bathroom. Dan found a spot near a wooded area and stopped the car. She got out, and I turned to Dan, suggesting we keep an eye on her, just in case. But before we could do anything, Lisa was back at the car, holding a gun. "Get out of the car," she said, her voice shaking but firm. We froze, shocked. Dan slowly raised his hands and got out, and I followed, my heart pounding. Lisa kept the gun pointed at us as she made a step away from the car. "I don't want to hurt you," she said, "but I need your car and your money. Empty your pockets and put everything on the ground." We did as she asked, laying our wallets, phones, and keys on the gravel. She grabbed them quickly, her hands trembling. "Please, you don't have to do this," Dan tried to reason with her, but she just shook her head. "I'm sorry," she said, her eyes darting around nervously. "I'm really sorry." She got into the driver's seat and started the engine. We watched helplessly as she sped off, leaving us stranded by the side of the road. We stood there for a moment, stunned. The sun was nearly gone, and it was getting dark fast. Dan and I started walking, hoping to find help before it got too late. We didn't talk much, both of us too shaken by what had just happened. After about an hour of walking, we saw headlights coming our way. We flagged the car down, and thankfully, the driver stopped. It was an older man, probably in his 60s, who looked concerned when we told him what had happened. He offered to take us to the nearest town, and we gratefully accepted. When we got to town, we went straight to the police station and reported the carjacking. The officers took our statements and said they would keep an eye out for our car. We spent the night at a cheap motel, neither of us getting much sleep. The next morning, we got a call from the police. They had found our car abandoned a few miles away, with most of our stuff still inside. Lisa was nowhere to be found. We were relieved to have our car back, but still shaken by the whole ordeal. We decided to cut our road trip short and head back home. The drive was quiet, both of us lost in our thoughts. I kept replaying the events in my head, wondering if there was something we could have done differently. Back home, life slowly returned to normal, but I couldn't shake the memory of Lisa's desperate eyes and the feel of cold fear when she pointed the gun at us. It was a harsh reminder of how quickly things can go wrong and how vulnerable we can be. I was conducting a study in the Rocky Mountains, studying the behavior of certain wildlife species. It was a beautiful, remote area, but also filled with potential dangers. I had been out in the wilderness for days, collecting data and observing the animals in their natural habitat. One afternoon, as I was hiking back to my campsite, I had a strange feeling that I was being watched. I glanced around, but I couldn't see anyone else on the trail. I tried to shake off the feeling and continued on my way, but the sense of unease lingered. That night, as I sat by the campfire, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I kept glancing around, half expecting to see someone lurking in the shadows. But the forest was quiet, except for the usual sounds of crickets and rustling leaves. As I was getting ready to turn in for the night, I heard a twig snap nearby. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I strained my ears, listening for any other sounds. There it was again, the unmistakable sound of someone or something moving through the underbrush. I cracked my flashlight and cautiously made my way towards the noise. I could feel my palms sweating as I crept through the darkness, my heart racing with each step. I shone the flashlight ahead of me, scanning the trees and bushes for any sign of movement. And then I saw him, a shadowy figure lurking in the trees. He was dressed in dark clothing, blending into the night. I could see the glint of his eyes as he watched me, his gaze filled with malice. I knew immediately that he was dangerous. I tried to back away quietly, but he must have heard me. He stepped out of the shadows, his face contorted into a sneer. "What are you doing out here all alone?" he asked, his voice low and menacing. I didn't answer, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew I needed to get out of there, but I didn't want to provoke him further. I took a step back, my eyes never leaving his. He took a step towards me, his eyes narrowing. "You think you're so smart, don't you?" he said. "But you don't know anything about me." I swallowed hard, trying to think of a way out of the situation. But before I could respond, he lunged towards me, his hands reaching out to grab me. I screamed and stumbled backwards, tripping over a tree root and falling to the ground. He was on top of me in an instant, his hands around my throat, squeezing tight. I struggled and fought, trying to break free, but he was too strong. I could feel the darkness closing in around me, my vision blurring as I fought for air. And then, suddenly, he was gone. I lay on the ground, gasping for breath, my heart pounding in my chest. I looked around, but there was no sign of him. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. I staggered to my feet, my body shaking with adrenaline. I knew I needed to get out of there, to find help before he came back. I stumbled through the forest, my legs weak and trembling, until I finally reached a clearing. And then I saw it, the lights of a ranger station shining in the distance. I ran towards them, my lungs burning with exertion. I burst through the door, gasping for breath, and collapsed onto the floor. The rangers rushed to my side, their faces filled with concern. They asked me what had happened, but all I could do was gasp out fragments of the story, my words coming out in a jumble. They took me to the hospital, where I was treated for my injuries. The police came and took my statement, but they never found the man who had attacked me. I don't know what he wanted or why he targeted me, but I'm grateful to be alive. I still have nightmares about that night, the sound of his voice echoing in my ears. But I try not to let it consume me. I know I'm lucky to have survived, and I'm determined to never let myself be caught off guard like that again. I had been training for months for this marathon. Living in a small town in Idaho, there weren't many options for long runs except the rural highways. It was usually quiet, just the sound of my footsteps and the occasional car passing by. I liked it that way. It was peaceful, and I could focus on my running. One afternoon, I was about 10 miles into my run when I noticed an old pickup truck trailing behind me. It was moving slowly, keeping pace with me. At first, I thought they might be lost or looking for something, so I didn't pay much attention. But after a few minutes, it became clear they were following me. I glanced back and saw 3 guys in the truck, all looking at me with grins that made my skin crawl. They sped up, pulling alongside me. The driver leaned out the window and shouted something, but I couldn't make out the words over the roar of the engine. They laughed, and the truck swerved closer to the shoulder, forcing me to step into the ditch. My heart started pounding, but I tried to keep my cool. I kept running, hoping they'd get bored and leave. Instead, they slowed down again, matching my pace. The driver yelled something about me being out of my territory and how I should watch my back. They laughed again, and the truck sped off, kicking up dust and gravel. I was shaken, but I kept running. I thought that was the end of it. But about a mile later, I saw the truck parked up ahead, blocking the road. The three guys were leaning against it, waiting for me. I considered turning back, but I was too far from home either way. I decided to keep going, hoping they'd just let me pass. As I got closer, they stepped into the middle of the road, forcing me to stop. The driver, a big guy with a shaved head and tattoos on his arms, stepped forward. He had a nasty look in his eyes. "Were you headed in such a hurry?" he asked, smirking. I told them I was just out for a run, trying to keep my voice steady. They circled around me, and I could feel the tension building. One of them, a skinny guy with a scar on his cheek, reached out and poked me in the chest. "We don't like strangers around here," he said. I tried to step back, but they closed in. My mind was racing, trying to figure out a way out of this. I noticed a small gap between the truck and the ditch. Without thinking, I made a break for it, sprinting as fast as I could. I heard them shouting behind me, but I didn't look back. I ran into the woods, hoping the trees would slow them down. My lungs were burning, and my legs felt like they were going to give out, but I kept pushing. I could hear them crashing through the underbrush, getting closer. I spotted a small creek and jumped across it, slipping on the wet rocks but managing to stay on my feet. The noise behind me grew fainter, and I hoped they had lost my trail. I kept running, putting as much distance between us as possible. Eventually, I reached a small clearing and collapsed, gasping for breath. My body was shaking, and I felt like I was going to throw up. I stayed there for a while, listening for any signs of pursuit. When I was sure they were gone, I started making my way back to the road, sticking to the edge of the woods. When I finally got back to the highway, I was miles from where I had started. My car was parked at a small rest stop, and I was terrified that the guys would be waiting for me there. I moved cautiously, staying hidden until I was sure it was safe. I made it to my car without seeing them again. My hands were trembling so much I could barely get the key in the ignition. I drove straight home, locking all the doors and windows when I got there. I reported the incident to the local sheriff, but there wasn't much they could do without more information. I couldn't stop thinking about those guys and how close I had come to being seriously hurt or worse. I haven't been able to go back to running on those rural highways since. Every time I think about it, my heart starts racing, and I feel that same cold fear. I stick to the treadmill now, where I know I'm safe. It's not the same, but after what happened, it's the only way I can keep training without looking over my shoulder every few minutes. I was driving through Silicon Valley late one night. I had just left a friend's place after a long day, and the road was quiet. It was around midnight, and there weren't many cars out. The streetlights cast long shadows, and everything felt still. I saw a car pulled over on the side of the road with its hazard lights flashing. As I got closer, I noticed a woman standing next to it, waving her arms. She looked distressed. I slowed down and pulled over, thinking she might need help. I rolled down my window and asked if she was okay. She said her car wouldn't start and her phone was dead. She seemed nervous, glancing around like she was scared of something. I offered to let her use my phone to call for help, but she said she didn't have anyone to call. Feeling bad for her, I decided to step out of the car and take a look under her hood. I'm not a mechanic, but I figured I could at least see if there was an obvious problem. She smiled and thanked me, but I noticed she kept looking around, which made me a bit uneasy. As I was checking her car, I heard footsteps behind me. Before I could turn around, I felt something hard hit the back of my head. Everything went black for a moment. When I came to, I was on the ground, and my car was gone. The woman and whoever hit me had taken it. My head was throbbing, and I felt dizzy. I looked around and realized I was in the middle of nowhere. There were no houses or buildings in sight, just an empty road stretching in both directions. I struggled to my feet, trying to get my bearings. My phone and wallet were in the car, so I had nothing on me. I started walking, hoping to find help. The night was cold, and the darkness seemed to press in from all sides. I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting those people to come back and finish what they started. Every rustle in the bushes made my heart race. After what felt like hours, I saw headlights approaching. I waved my arms, hoping the driver would stop. The car slowed down and pulled over. A man rolled down his window and asked what had happened. I quickly explained, and he offered me a ride to the nearest gas station. I got in the car, and we drove in silence for a few minutes. The man introduced himself as Tom. He seemed nice enough, but after what had just happened, I was on edge. I kept glancing at him, trying to figure out if I could trust him. We reached a gas station, and Tom offered to wait with me until I could get help. The clerk let me use the phone to call the police and report the carjacking. I also called my friend to come pick me up. As I waited, I kept thinking about how easily I had been tricked. The woman had seemed so genuine, and I had let my car down. Now, I was stranded and had no idea where my car was or if I would ever see it again. The police arrived and took my statement. They said they would keep an eye out for my car, but they didn't seem very hopeful. My friend showed up a little while later, and I thanked Tom for his help before leaving with my friend. The whole ride home, I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. I felt stupid for stopping to help, but I also knew I would probably do it again. It's hard to ignore someone in need, even after an experience like that. Over the next few days, I kept in touch with the police, but there were no leads. My car was gone, along with everything in it. I had to cancel my credit cards and get a new phone. It was a mess. I still drive through Silicon Valley sometimes, but now I'm always on edge. I can't stop thinking about that night, and I always wonder if the people who took my car are out there, doing the same thing to someone else. I was on a solo road trip in the Pacific Northwest. I needed some inspiration for my writing and thought a change of scenery would help. The winding roads through dense forests and mist-covered mountains were beautiful and calming. I had been driving for hours, enjoying the solitude and the quiet. It was late afternoon when I first noticed the car behind me. A dark SUV, keeping pace with me no matter how much I sped up or slowed down. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence, but the more I drove, the more it seemed like the SUV was deliberately staying behind me. I tried to shake it off, thinking I was just being paranoid. But as the minutes turned into hours, the feeling of being followed became stronger. The SUV was always there, matching my speed, never getting too close, but never falling too far behind. I decided to stop at a gas station to see if the SUV would continue on without me. I pulled off the highway and into the station, watching the SUV in my rearview mirror. To my relief, It drove past without stopping. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. After filling up my tank and grabbing a coffee, I got back on the road. The sun was starting to set, casting long shadows across the landscape. The colors were beautiful, but I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. I kept checking my mirrors, half expecting to see the SUV again. As night fell, the road became darker and more isolated. There were fewer cars, and the trees seemed to close in around me. I turned on my headlights and kept driving, trying to focus on the road ahead. That's when I saw the SUV again. It was a few cars behind me, but it was definitely the same one. My heart started pounding. I tried to think rationally. Maybe it was just a coincidence. Maybe the driver was going the same way I was. But deep down, I knew it wasn't a coincidence. The SUV had found me again. I decided to test my theory. I took the next exit, a small, poorly lit road that led deeper into the forest. If the SUV followed me, I would know for sure. As I turned, I watched the SUV in my mirror. It followed. My mind raced. I had no cell service out here, no way to call for help. I needed to find a way to lose the SUV. I sped up, driving faster than I should have on the narrow, winding road. The SUV kept up, its headlights glaring in my mirror. I took sharp turns, hoping to throw the driver off, but they stayed right behind me. Panic set in. My hands were shaking, and my breath was coming in short gasps. I couldn't keep this up much longer. I spotted a small dirt road branching off to the right. Without thinking, I swerved onto it, gravel flying as I sped down the narrow path. The SUV followed, its tires crunching on the dirt. The road was rough, and my car bounced and jolted as I drove. The path led deeper into the forest, the trees closing in on either side. I could barely see the road ahead, but I kept going, hoping the SUV would get stuck or lose track of me. I glanced in my mirror and saw the SUV was still there, closer now. Desperation took over. I needed to get away. I saw a gap in the trees ahead and veered off the road, driving into the forest. Branches scraped against my car, and I could hear the SUV crashing through the underbrush behind me. I drove until I couldn't see the road anymore, then stopped and turned off my lights. I sat in the dark, listening. My heart was pounding so loudly I thought it would give me away. I heard the SUV's engine, then it stopped too. Silence. I waited, trying to calm my breathing. Minutes passed, feeling like hours. Then I heard footsteps, crunching through the underbrush. They were getting closer. I couldn't see anything, but I could hear the person moving through the forest, searching. I knew I couldn't stay in my car. I needed to move, find a place to hide. I quietly opened the door and slipped out, crouching low as I crept away from my car. The footsteps were still there, but I couldn't tell how close. I moved through the trees, trying to be as silent as possible. My heart was racing, and every sound seemed magnified. I heard the person stop, then start moving again, coming in my direction. I ducked behind a large tree, holding my breath. The footsteps got closer, then stopped. I could hear the person breathing, just on the other side of the tree. I closed my eyes, praying they wouldn't find me. After what felt like an eternity, the footsteps started again, moving away from me. I waited until I couldn't hear them anymore, then started moving again. I needed to get back to the road, find help. I kept low, moving as quickly and quietly as I could. The forest was dark and disorienting, but I kept going. After what felt like hours, I saw the faint glow of headlights through the trees. I made my way towards them, hoping it was a passing car on the highway. As I got closer, I realized it was my own car. The SUV was gone. I hurried back to my car, got in, and started the engine. I drove back to the main road, checking my mirrors constantly. There was no sign of the SUV. I didn't stop until I reached a small town, where I found a diner that was still open. I went inside, shaking and exhausted. The waitress gave me a concerned look and asked if I was okay. I told her what had happened, and she called the police. They arrived a short time later and took my statement. The police said they would look into it, but I never heard back. I left the Pacific Northwest the next day, cutting my trip short. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of being followed.